Hello, my name is Andrew Beckton, and I'm an 8th grade teacher at Palestine ISD. And today in this presentation, we are going to be exploring different supervisory styles. We're going to be talking about how we can approach our conference time with our teachers and give them the best, most efficient advice that we can give them. I think as administrators, one of the key jobs that we often forget about is that we are really there to manage people, and that means managing different types of personalities and characteristics. And this may just be one of the most important aspects of the job. Student success does hinge on the ability of teachers to be able to teach, and as administrators, we must be there to support them effectively and using proven strategies. So without any further ado, we're going to explore some of these strategies. Now, before we get into the gist of things, I do want to point out that some of the information, really definitions that you're going to hear in this presentation, were taken from the Texas Documentation Handbook, the 6th edition. And so some of the definitions we use verbatim. Just for transparency here, I just want to share that those definitions are coming from this book. Furthermore, just as another source, especially as we get into some of the strategies, we're going to be borrowing heavily from the developmental approach to supervision by Dr. Carl Glickman. This is really the meat and potatoes of our presentation. We're going to be using him as a big reference and a guide to help us understand not only more about our teachers, but more about ourselves. And so that's going to lead us to our very next slide, which says to know yourself. So as educators, we have to understand that, or excuse me, as administrators, we have to understand that we have our own characters, our own personalities, and we have to understand what is our educational philosophy. And so there are 3 main educational or supervisor philosophies that are presented in this presentation by Dr. Glickman. And what I've done here is I've chosen to use a stoplight as a good metaphor because as you notice, we have colors. We have red, which means stop, yellow, which means slow down, and then we have, of course, green, which is go. And so I kind of equate each of those colors to the way we as supervisors can either, and I almost hate to use the word restrict, but at times we have to kind of restrict our teachers and in order to help them find a better way. And so that would be red. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right there. And so let's have a look at the first supervision style. We call this direct supervision. This is when the supervisor takes charge. They give clear instructions, they set expectations, they closely monitor performance. And this type of style works really well, I would say, for new teachers, beginner teachers who are inexperienced and they need some structured guidance from their administrators. So that would be direct supervision using the red light. When it comes to the second style, that would be more collaborative. So this time the supervisor and the teacher are going to work together as partners. Decisions are going to be shared. The teacher's input is valued. And this is usually best for teachers with some experience who can reflect on their practice. And so an example of this that I put down would be maybe a teacher wants to try a new teaching strategy. So the supervisor discusses, some options, they share some ideas, and together they kind of create this plan for implementation and for follow-up. So again, this kind of allows for some collaborative work. The third supervision approach that is explored is the non-directive supervision. So again, this is the polar opposite of direct supervision. That's why we go from red to green, and this really allows teachers to take the lead while the supervisor acts more like a resource or a consultant for that particular teacher. So an example of this again would be An experienced teacher is identifying areas of professional growth. So the supervisor provides support only when they're asked. Maybe they'll recommend resources, or they'll just go in and observe the teacher. If the teacher's like, hey, I want to try this, I want your feedback, can you come in? And so it's a little more hands off, but nevertheless, it's very effective. It allows for that teacher to kind of explore um, their options on that. Dr. Carl Glickman, who we referred to earlier, emphasized that effective supervisors must be flexible and they must be able to move between direct, collaborative, and non-directive supervision styles depending on the teacher's level of development. Okay, so we have to be flexible. We have to be able to recognize our teacher. And that leads us to the next slide. So we go from knowing ourselves to knowing our teachers. Now, things are about to get kind of heavy here, so we're going to move fairly quickly. I don't want to rush these points, but we certainly need to get through them. So when we talk about our teachers, Carl Glickman points out some very important aspects of our teachers. And in fact, he calls them levels. So we have these two different levels that we're focusing on with our teachers. And the first one is the level of abstraction. This means the ability to identify classroom problems and generate solutions. So can our teachers more or less think for themselves? Are they critical thinkers? Are they able to think outside the box? Are they able to improvise and adapt and overcome whenever they need to, right? Now, as you notice, everything I just said seems to have a different vibe than everything I have listed. And so what I actually have here are examples of low abstraction. So if a teacher is concrete in their thinking, if it's hard for them to sort of, think again outside the box, and they see teaching tasks as procedures, as steps, and not necessarily principles, then you're going to have this problem. Or maybe they just have a very narrow focus. They're concerned with the immediate lesson rather than long-term objectives. Or they're limiting their self-reflection. They can't really analyze or critique their own teaching style because, again, the next point says they have difficulty with alternatives. They're very used to doing things their way. So that would be a abstraction, level of abstraction, really low level of abstraction. The second aspect of teachers that we have to look at is their level of commitment. The level of commitment, it says, is the willingness to accept responsibility for student learning and to place students, not adults, first in decision making. Okay, that is so key and very important. So these teachers, these are low level of commitment teachers that I have listed here. These are some of the characteristics you might notice in a teacher with a low level of commitment. You're going to see minimal effort, just kind of doing enough to skate by. You have low investment in the students. Again, they see the student's success as the student's responsibility, not necessarily a shared responsibility. That is a very dangerous outlook, okay? They're very resistant to change because they've been doing it their way for a long time. They have limited professional engagement, weak goal orientation. They're motivated by external things, care more about the paycheck, I guess you could say, than the grade or what the data shows, okay? So as we move forward, we'll notice that this is the actual diagram by Dr. Carl Glickman. And as you can see, there are different axes on this chart that refer both to a teacher's level of abstraction and their level of commitment. So this is going to be critical as we begin to plot on this chart in just a moment. All right, moving along. We have to understand that if we are to be successful supervisors, we will need to incorporate certain measures that assure productivity during our conference time with our teachers. And so the things that we're looking at are diagnosis. Okay, so the question we should ask is what is effective and what is ineffective? So when we're talking to our teachers, We need to point out things that are working, things that are not working. An example of this would be a new teacher who is struggling with classroom management. Maybe they need some structure, they need some confidence. Secondly, we have a prescription. So what must or what could change? So let's take that same new teacher that we just talked about, and maybe we can provide a model lesson plan or a step-by-step classroom routines and weekly observations with feedback. And that kind of takes us into the last step here, which is timelines. How can we arrange timelines? How much time is reasonable for change to occur? And an example of that would be, hey, let's have a weekly check-in for 6 weeks. We'll adjust our plan after that first grading period. Now, if we take the diagnosis, prescription, and timelines and we go to the next slide, we'll notice that these fall back in line with our supervision styles. So is this an example of a non-directive or a collaborative or a very directive supervisory style? And I would say it would be directive, because we are taking control of the situation. We're trying to help this young new teacher understand where they can improve, but we're going to have to give them more concrete steps to achieve that. Now here we are on the, again, on the diagram, but as you can see, we have 4 quadrants here, okay? We are divided into 4 sections. We have quadrant 1, 2, and we're going counterclockwise here. 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. So we have our low commitment, low abstraction, high commitment, low abstraction, high commitment and high abstraction, and low commitment with high abstraction. These are different combinations that require different solutions. So very quickly, I'm going to give us 4 teachers. We're going to talk about each of them in detail. We're going to decide, okay, which teacher needs which type of support or supervision. So example 1, we have Mrs. Rivera. Consistently volunteers for leadership roles. She mentors new teachers, and she reflects deeply on pedagogy, and she readily adapts her lesson plans based on student needs. So we're talking about a teacher here who we could probably say falls into the quadrant 4. She is high commitment, high abstraction. So good job, Mrs. Rivera. Secondly, we have a Mr. Chen, who is enthusiastic, he's hardworking, he arrives early, he stays late, he follows all the directives carefully. However, he struggles to connect daily tasks with broader instructional goals, and he's often asking for step-by-step guidance. So in this case, well, we're going to have a teacher who is high commitment, but low abstractions. Hard for him to think outside the box. Now we have our third teacher. This is Mrs. Patel. She has strong theoretical knowledge. She can talk at length about instructional design and learning theory. However, she rarely implements ideas in her classroom. She avoids extra responsibilities, and so she's having a hard time in that area. Well, now we see somebody with low commitment but high abstraction. That is our third one right here. This is Mrs. Patel. And then lastly, we have Mr. Johnson. He puts in minimal effort, rarely plans thoroughly, and he resists feedback. He does not show interest in professional growth and has difficulty understanding or applying larger educational concepts. So in this case, unfortunately for Mr. Johnson, we're going to see that he is a low commitment and low abstraction. Now, these people are going to require different supervision. And so what are the different supervisory strategies that we're going to use with them? So here we go. Let's have a quick look. First of all, with Mrs. Rivera, her high commitment and high abstraction, she is going to basically be provided resources only if she asks. So this is very non-directive. This is kind of hands-off. We're going to let her do things the way that she wants to do them. And whenever she needs help, hey, we're there for her. Or we'll have a situation where we have high commitment and low abstraction. That was Mr. Chen, right? We're going to provide him with clear step-by-step directions and structured models that kind of give him a better understanding of what he can do to be successful. Third of all, we have Mrs. Patel. As you remember, this is low commitment but high abstraction. So we're going to move her from, talk to action, right? Actions speak louder than words. We know you're smart. We know you're good at understanding things, but you don't quite get, all the concepts. So we're going to move you into being more of a doer than a sayer. And then, of course, for Mr. Johnson, who struggles with commitment and abstraction, we're going to provide explicit, structured guidance and clear expectations for him to follow. So What are the big takeaways, the key takeaways we have here? There is no single style that works for all teachers. We're going to have to come up with multiple supervisory strategies for all of our teachers. Secondly, directive supervision helps teachers with low abstraction and or low commitment. And collaborative supervision bridges uneven development. So that's when we are having a teacher who has high one end, low the other end. That's when we're going to want to collaborate. And then, of course, lastly, non-directive supervision empowers highly developed teachers. It allows them to sort of be themselves and have the freedom to improve on their own terms, but as long as we are there to support them. Again, my name is Andrew Beckton. I hope you learned something from this presentation, and thank you for your time.